Well, hello my friends. Welcome back. I just wanted to make one last video for this year of 2019 today on December 31st. Just to close out the year. This is not going to cover any recapping. It's not going to do any detailed work on repair just because those videos take me a long time to do, and I wanted to get this particular video out before the end of the year. So really all I'm doing today is commentary. I wanted to say a word of thanks to my subscribers, then explain a little bit about myself, why I focus on Apple so much, and then end the video with some commentary on the new Mac Pro. So to begin, as far as my subscribers go, thank you very much for those of you who have subscribed during this calendar year of 2019. There were 500, as of right now, 571 of you subscribed this year, and we only lost one subscriber. And I'm very thankful for that. I have a very small channel right now, and so 571 subscribers, to the big guys, that's nothing. But to me, it's significant because my total subscriber base is about just over 1,300 now. So you can see that I almost doubled my subscribers this year. And so I thank you very much. I thank you for my existing subscribers who had been with me prior to this year because, well, again, only one person unsubscribed this year. So I think that's telling me that my channel does have merit for many of you who are subscribed, and that inspires me to keep going and doing more. Now, I don't have any ads turned on, AdSense is turned off, even though I'm allowed to turn it on. Now that I'm over 1,000 subscribers, it really wouldn't have any monetary merit for me if I did that because my subscriber base still is too small, and all it would do is upset you because if you're like me, you don't like ads. So I haven't turned those on. And well, I want to keep them turned off for your sakes for as long as possible. But again, thank you. And again, I'd like to thank Alex Santos because he is the first person and still the only person who has contributed financially to this channel. And so I just wanted to say another thank you to Alex for doing that. As far as why my videos are so focused on Apple, it's because as a hobby, I started out, well, not started out collecting, but in recent years I have been collecting more vintage machines, and that's become somewhat of a hobby for me. And as that hobby grows, as many of you know who are hobbyists yourselves or in the vintage Mac community, well, these machines need work to keep running. And it's fun to keep them running. Even though you could launch mini VMac and run an emulator, it's just not the same as running a actual machine. And well, why did I even want to get involved in collecting in the first place? Well, my history goes back to 1984, which if you look down here, you can see this is actually a frame grab in a book here of the 1984 commercial, which came out exactly 36 years ago on December 31st, 1983. That commercial was shown to the world. And the original Macintosh with 128K of RAM debuted in January of 1984. And my story and relationship with the Mac is somewhat interesting, so I thought I'd share that with you today. Well, at the very end of 1983, my father was given the opportunity to take a cash bonus or get whatever the new Apple computer would be, and he chose the latter instead of taking a cash bonus. And in early I don't think it was January, but very early that year in 1984, he came home with a Macintosh 128K. And actually, we can open up this. This is So Far. It's called So Far, a book that was put out by Apple and printed in 1987. So it's a pretty nifty book, although kind of heavily focused on the Apple II, but that's because Apple was selling mostly Apple IIs at that time. Even well into the 80s, but it does have a spread on the original Mac, and you've seen the original Mac on my 400K video lubing video recently. Anyway, I don't remember if my dad did a test drive because it says here 200,000 people actually signed up for this test drive where you could take a Mac home before you actually bought it to see if you wanted to buy it. But he walked home with a Macintosh 128K and an ImageWriter 1 dot matrix printer. Unfortunately, he didn't have the bonus, I guess you could say, to get the external 400K floppy drive, which would have saved me a lot of heartache, because the machine at the time didn't have enough RAM to where you could put a lot of the data that was read from those 400K disks into RAM. And what you were doing is floppy swapping, right? You would boot off one floppy, and then maybe there would be a program on another floppy, and man, you would have to just swap out. It wasn't, I don't want to say it was a living hell, but using that very first one with such limited RAM, there were times when you really, really did have to swap. I would say the worst case, 30 times would I be swapping out the disk. But yeah, that was my first computer that I had at home. That was the very first computer. And all of my other friends, they had a Commodore 64, pretty much all of them. Or maybe they had an Atari 2600, which wasn't a computer, of course, it was just a game machine. But even my Commodore 64 friends, primarily what they did with it was play games. They didn't really do word processing and other things on it, at least not so much. But for me, it was totally different because, yeah, I kind of missed color. My other friends, the 2600 with the Commodore 64, it had color. But the key difference between the Mac and those computers was screen resolution. Because on the Mac, it had its own monitor. You didn't use a TV. And even though it didn't have color, the pixels were sharp and small. It was very high resolution for the time. And if you look at it today, it's kind of quaint, and the screen is extremely small by today's standards. But it was extremely high resolution back in the day. And I really viewed that computer as a very professional machine. And indeed it was. And Apple wanted to target it primarily at businesses. But that machine really changed my life. I was 13 in 1984, so I was at about that right age as a young boy that my brain was at its peak activity, you know. And so I've been an Apple user ever since. And yeah, you can see here, this is actually an original issue of Macworld magazine. You can see Steve Jobs here introducing the Mac, and you can actually get a PDF version of this to browse this magazine. I'll put a link to it in the description below. But it's actually a pretty neat magazine in that it was, I mean, I love these magazines because it shows the actual circuit board, and then in yellow it marks the actual places on the board with a detailed explanation below of what all of the components are, which is pretty nifty. Even the analog board is completely described in this magazine. It even has Bill Gates. He was actually young once. And so again, you can look down in the text description below, and I will put a link to this so you can check out the PDF. To me, the PDF isn't quite the same as this paper copy, but it's the same content, so you can check that out. But yeah, my connection to the Mac goes back to 1984. And it has continued. I never defected to Windows. In fact, even to this day, I don't even have one Windows computer in my home. We're a completely exclusive Mac household. Back when I was living in California, I live in Japan now. Back when I was living in California, we never had a Windows machine. We were completely a Mac household back then. When I moved to Japan, I influenced the company I work for to get Macs. And yeah, we did design work, and we did it for that. But ultimately, when I came over here, I had a Quadra 650. It was originally a Mac 2 FX, but I paid I remember I saved my pennies, and I saved up so I could buy a Quadra 650 motherboard. I did a motherboard swap. It cost me $1,000 US to do that. Anyway, I brought that machine with me when I moved to Japan, and before I left that company, I sold it to them for, I don't remember how much I sold it to them for, but I sold that machine to the company, and I don't know, Japan still uses fax communication, even now in 2019. As far as I know, it's still running today as a 24/7 fax server. That's what they transformed it into by adding a fax card in the machine. Those original Macs were really workhorses, I mean, built like tanks. And I've been a Mac guy, well, all of these years. And it's just an enjoyable hobby for me to get vintage Macs up and running. But not even vintage. I mean, I have a video on how to resurrect a 2009 iMac. That's technically not vintage, although it is obsolete. I talk about my MacBook Pro, the 2015 version, the last great MacBook Pro, because it's the one that has an SD card slot. And there's a lot more I could say about that. But yeah, I'm really through and through a Mac guy. So I try to keep this channel focused on that because that's what I know. I really live and breathe Apple. I still subscribe to Macworld magazine. It's the digital edition now, but I pay to get that digital subscription, and I'd like to stay informed on it. Yeah, I read Apple Insider articles, and I participate in their forums, and some of you who are in that forum know me from there because my channel name matches my handle for that forum as well. But I like to keep up on the tech media, but especially media that's focused on Apple. So I really live and breathe that particular brand. And so that's really what my channel is mostly about, things that pertain to Apple. And whenever I have a problem with something, rather than selfishly just quietly in a closet fix it and not help anybody else, I think it's important to make the time and effort to get my camera set up, turn it on, and show people how to do those things which ultimately benefited me so that they could benefit you as well. And that's my aim, and that's why I do a lot of repair videos. So that's just a little bit of background on me and what my channel is about. Now, before I close this video, I just wanted to say a few words about the Mac Pro. If you've been following the news, and I'm sure that many of you do, you're kind of tech savvy like I am, you've probably seen everything you want to know about the Mac Pro, and so I'm not going to cover that. And I actually can't really cover that because I don't have a Mac Pro here to show you. But the Mac Pro, as of 2019, the new, as some call it, the cheese grater Mac Pro, is an amazing machine in terms of its performance, but of course also its price. And there are really two camps of people. You've got one camp of people who explain why it's a good value, even if you go all the way up to the $53,000 model, spec'd out, why compared to PCs, you're getting actually the same or better value than you would if you went a PC route. And I'm not going to argue against that. But then you have another group of people who say, well, it's just too expensive. And the truth of the matter is that although it is a good machine, I think people who do mention the price have a legitimate gripe. Now that upsets people who I would say are Apple worshippers. I don't use that term flippantly. That's my term that I prefer to use because the word worship comes from the older English worthship, which talks about how much worth we give something. So if you're a Christian person, you go to church to worship God, you are basically giving that God your time. You're saying you are worthy, right? So when you worship something, even a car, I don't suggest you worship a car, but some people do. I don't even suggest you worship a computer. I enjoy Macs, but I'm not an Apple worshiper. I am just a big fan of Apple. So I wouldn't be classified as a fanboy, but there are some people who are Apple worshippers in that they believe that Apple is infallible, that Apple never makes any mistakes, that Apple is too big of a company to be wrong, and that any one individual must be wrong because an individual doesn't have the brain power to outthink the world's largest corporation. And if you think about that, you might say, well, logically, they've got a point. But a corporation is still a collection of human beings, and there's no one among us who is perfect. And so Apple isn't infallible, even though they may be right a lot of the time. And what I mean by saying all this is that the Mac Pro, while being an amazing machine, if you can see iJustine, you can see Linus Tech Tips, you can see all manner of the big guys with 6 million or 10 million subscribers to their names who are reviewing this machine, and I think their reviews of the machine are brilliant, by the way. But they are able to buy one. They are wealthy enough to where they can afford it. But for myself, I cannot. And for the vast majority of you, I think you're in the same boat as I am. Now, if you go on the forums and you mention anything that's talking about the price, and you might say, oh, I wish there was a more affordable Mac Pro, like in the days of yesteryear, when it was around $3,000 for one, inevitably someone will come along and say, oh, it's not made for you. And honestly, I just hate that statement because it's a flat-out lie. It's a fabrication. You might say, what, James? Isn't it a Pro machine made for pros? Folks, what is Pro in the Apple lineup? Is it the iPad Pro? If it is, what makes the iPad Pro Pro? Is it the SD card slot that it has? No, because it doesn't have one. Is it all of the external connectivity that it has? Well, no, it doesn't have that. I mean, if you think about what is really Pro, you walk into a TV studio and you're going to see all these huge cameras and they've got cables coming out of them. That is truly a Pro machine. It's used for professional paid work, and you've got all means of your ability to expand it, right? That is what we traditionally think of as Pro, and I think that's most accurate. And so if you think of that as in terms of the iPad Pro, well, the iPad Pro certainly isn't that. But yet the Mac Pro is, in that it is expandable. You can expand it. So there's not really a lot of consistency in Apple's product line. I don't say this as a knock towards Apple. I just say, well, it's just a matter of fact that the word Pro is not consistent in Apple's product line because the iPad Pro and the Mac Pro have a different definition of what that Pro is. Even the MacBook Pro from 2016 until now, it doesn't have an SD card slot. It doesn't even have USB-A. You're supposed to plug in a dongle. And if you forget the dongle, oh well, if you lose the dongle when you need to do a presentation in 5 minutes, well, you're kind of out of luck. So anyway, I don't see a consistency there in terms of the word Pro. And I think that is somewhat of a flaw. But because I don't view Apple as being perfect, I do sometimes wish that there was a expandable tower Mac, like many of you do, that could supplant a Hackintosh. Many people build Hackintoshes not because they want to, but because they need a tower computer and they want it to be affordable, which means if it's about $3,000, maybe that's affordable for you. But when the starting price is about $6,000 and the base model only has a half a terabyte, which is what the new Mac Pro does, right? And the video card isn't really that great. The base model Mac Pro at $6,000 is not a good deal. Even most of the big name tech YouTubers have said that. So I don't think it's wrong to wish that. I don't think it's wrong to say, boy, I wish we had a Mac Pro that was affordable yet expandable in a tower form. And to say it's not made for you is wrong because the truth of the matter is that Apple will sell you anything. Now in the past, when they first started out, they targeted mostly businesses. Apple III, remember that? The Apple III failed computer, they targeted businesses with that. The Lisa was targeting businesses. They weren't targeting the average consumer. And eventually that changed. And now the iPhone, I mean, it's truly targeted at consumers, but even most Macs are targeted at consumers now. Even the iMac Pro, you might say it has Pro in the name, but the only thing really consistent with the name Pro in Apple's line is that anything with the name Pro is simply higher priced than the same model device that doesn't have the word Pro. Now, you do get more when you buy the Pro, but the word Pro doesn't necessarily mean more ports or something traditional like you would expect on a true professional device. It just means you get a little bit more, but you pay more. And with the Mac Pro computer, you get a lot of expandability, but at a much higher cost. So is the Mac Pro made for you? Yes, it is. It is made for you. It is made for anyone who has the money to pay for it. And that's what the Mac Pro boils down to. Whether we like it or not, it is made for any of us In fact, you could have a maid who works for a motel who just happens to have $50,000-$60,000 saved up in her savings, and for whatever reason she wants to buy a Mac Pro. If she wants to buy a Mac Pro and she has the money, Apple's not going to say, no, you shouldn't buy it, right? Apple is going to sell you a product if you want to buy it. It doesn't matter if you're a pro or not. It doesn't matter if you're going to use it as a hobbyist or not. So to say it's not made for you is wrong. Technically speaking, the people who might get the most benefit might be a Hollywood studio. But that doesn't mean you are prohibited from getting it. It doesn't mean that it's totally out of your class. You are a peasant, you know. It doesn't mean that. It means you can, if you have the money, buy that machine, a professional machine. And I think a lot of us want that level of professionalism. We don't necessarily need all that the new Mac Pro in 2019 has to offer. But we are nostalgic. We remember the Power Macs. My father, he is in his late 70s now. He owned a Power Mac G5. He did. And he's not a wealthy guy. He didn't use it for professional use. He's not even very computer savvy. I help him out a lot, actually. But he bought a G5 tower because it was reasonably priced at the time. They had the blue and white G3 towers. They had, I mean, Apple has had towers for a long time, and the Mac Pro series towers were also fairly affordable. I would say up until the 2013 trash can Mac Pro, the Apple towers were reasonably affordable, hovering around $3,000 in the price. In 2012, the trash can Mac kind of upped that price, and so you didn't really get a lot of value I'm talking about the average consumer, for what you paid. And now with the new Mac Pro, it's really difficult, if not impossible, for the average Mac lover and Mac fan to justify the price of that machine unless you're just making money hand over fist as a freelancer or a business to justify that. But that doesn't mean it makes us stop wanting the machine, right? I think there are many of us who might say, well, I only make videos every now and then for YouTube, but I shoot in 4K and I'd like to have a faster workflow. And maybe you have reasons for choosing that over the iMac Pro, right? Because the actual functionality of the Mac Pro is superior in many ways to the iMac Pro, but yet you just can't justify the cost. And so that's really what I wanted to say on the Mac Pro. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Don't let those people tell you it's not made for you. It is made for you. It's just a matter of whether you have enough money to pay for it or not. And like I said, I've been a Mac fan for many years, so I've spent a considerable sum on Apple devices through the years, and I don't really have any regrets in doing that. And I think that if you are an Apple fan like I am, you wish to continue in that ecosystem, and you wish to not only enjoy your most modern computers, but also the computers that you had in the past. I don't know about you, but I don't think any of us really want to throw out the older Apples that we've accumulated through the years. I even have a PowerBook Wall Street. Remember those? Yeah, PowerBook Wall Street. It's not very practical, but it runs OS 9, and it can run some software that my modern computers can't. But even though I hardly ever use it, it just, you don't want to get rid of it. There's a lot of value to Apple, whereas Windows machines, I mean, they're really a dime a dozen. If you look on eBay and the other auctions, you can see why. And so I just wanted to say in this video that a few things, to share these few things with you, to explain a little bit more about myself and why I have such a strong connection to Apple, and why I'm going to continue to put out videos that pertain to Apple products. If possible, I'd like to put out some videos on more recent machines, but really, because I'm not a full-time YouTuber, I don't have the financial means to acquire the latest and greatest like some of the big name YouTubers do. And so when I review something or talk about something, or whether it be a repair or otherwise, I usually talk about things that are, well, pertaining to the computers that I own. So that's all I'll say for today. Thank you again to my 571 new subscribers for this year of 2019. Thank you for all of my other subscribers who have been with me so long. Thank you for your support of this channel. And I wish all of you a very happy new year in 2020 and wish you the best in the coming months. Thanks.